Digital cameras are great. We use digital cameras everywhere and all the time. But as with any other type of design, there are trade-offs. And if we wanted to design a camera that sucked as much as possible in every dimension in which a camera can suck, it might look something like this, or perhaps like this. Let's take a look inside to understand why.
Here's the lens. The lens is responsible for focusing light from the subject onto the image sensor in the camera.
This lens is much larger than what you see on your smartphone. It's also more sophisticated. It contains 13 different optical elements. Their characteristics balance each other out to give the best possible image quality. In a smartphone, we don't have room for that. A smartphone is also much less expensive.
On to the aperture. The aperture is one of the mechanisms that controls the amount of light. In a more advanced camera, we use the aperture to help us control the amount of light, and we're able to make trade-offs between the aperture and the shutter. But one of the consequences of having a relatively small and simple lens system is that we cannot control the focus of the lens, so we make up for that with the aperture. Many inexpensive cameras run at a small aperture, which gives the camera greater depth of field, which means that we have to worry less about focus. That decision takes away an important characteristic. That decision can also have other effects on the quality of the image that's thrown by the lens. Here's the image sensor, and here's the shutter. In more advanced cameras, we can use a mechanical shutter in order to control how long the exposure is made. Mechanical shutters have some disadvantages, but they also have important advantages. In the case of a small, simple camera, we simply don't have room for a mechanical shutter. So we use electronic circuits to perform that operation. Those circuits are not ideal in all cases. In a more advanced camera, we have the choice between mechanical shutter and electronic shutter, and we can decide what's best in each circumstance.
The image sensor demands particular attention because of its central role in the process. The camera in this smartphone is up in the corner. This camera is much larger, and you can imagine that this camera has a much larger image sensor than the smartphone. And that size alone dictates some important characteristics of the image that they can produce.
As a simple comparison, here is an image size for full frame 35. Here's an APS-C sensor. There's a smartphone sensor. Now, using a physically small image sensor in the phone allows us to make the rest of the optical system small. The focal length of the lens we use depends in part on the size of the image sensor, but that small size has several consequences. Today's smartphones have quite a few pixels, but not as many as a very high-end camera. As we reduce the number of pixels, we get an effect known as pixelation that reduces the resolution of the image. This diagram shows the cross-section of an image sensor. We have a photo sensor, a color filter, and a micro lens. The physical size of that photo sensor determines the pixel size, the pixelation noise, but it also has other effects as well. As that photo sensor becomes physically smaller, basic physics means that we have increased electronic noise in the photo sensor that shows up as noise in the image. As we make the pixel larger, the effect of pixelation noise increases. In the case of a smartphone sensor, it's physically very small. That means that we're dealing with more electronic noise than we would with a larger image sensor with the same number of pixels.
Now, of course, a small camera and an inexpensive camera is a very useful thing to have. I've taken some very nice photographs on my smartphone. But for other applications, we need other types of cameras. And that means we need to explore the design space and make the best fit between what we need and how we design the camera.